and I'd like to welcome Jason Marshall, KITC Business Manager, and also Claire Robinson and Wendy May, Trading Standards Officers from Kent County Council. E-commerce, how to enter the virtual retail world.
Hi Marcus. Hello everyone.
Hello Marcus. Hi everyone.
Hello, I'm Claire.
Brilliant. Thanks Claire. Thanks Wendy. So yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Jason Marshall, and I'm going to be talking about e-commerce, how to enter the virtual retail world. So just to get started, I wanted to just let you know who I am and what the KITC is, the organisation that I represent. So the KITC, or the Kent IT Consultancy, is the University of Kent's student-staffed IT consultancy. Effectively, we're on a mission to make small businesses like yours more digital, and at the same time, we're making our graduates that bit more employable. We're able to help them work on real-life projects and give them the opportunity to work with clients, and really, when they graduate, the opportunity to stand out from the crowd. So you can see on the left there, the image, that's a picture of some of our recent graduates, and the slightly awkward one at the back, photobombing them. So yeah, we typically have about 30 odd students working for us at any one time, delivering a range of consultancy services targeting around digital transformation. So my role is I run the KITC. I've got a decade or so experience in IT and putting technology to work. So I'm really excited to be talking to you today about e-commerce. So this is the structure of the session. I'm going to talk for about 90 minutes. It reminds me I need to start my timer. And I'm firstly going to start with some assumptions, objectives, and exclusions. I want to make sure that everyone feels like they're in the right place before they commit the next 90 minutes. I'm going to be talking about a case study that is an organisation called Hometown Rochester that we're going to use to explain our process. I'm going to then pause just briefly and get you to think about what the future might look like, and get you to think about what you want from e-commerce. What does success look like? Then for the rest of the session, we're going to talk about whether or not you're ready for e-commerce. I'm going to walk you through our e-commerce checklist and take you through that step by step. Lastly, I'm going to talk very briefly about our digital coaching service, which we hope to be able to support you on your journey towards e-commerce. And I should say, I'm going to bring in our colleagues from KCC to help me talk about the legal aspects of the e-commerce checklist. So just starting with assumptions, and hopefully this rings true from how we advertised it, but I'm assuming that you're an existing bricks and mortar store, or you have some kind of physical retail experience. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're not those things, but that's just how we've designed the slide deck. I'm going to assume you don't have any e-commerce experience, or that you're looking for a refresher. I'm going to assume that you've got a website already, and that you're looking to add e-commerce to that. Again, it doesn't really matter if actually what you want to do is start from scratch, that's okay. And I'm going to assume that you want to add e-commerce as an additional sales channel alongside your physical sales. And the last thing, which is quite key, is I'm assuming that you're planning to use some kind of subscription-based e-commerce platform. So something like Shopify or Volusion or Squarespace to build your platform. So I'm assuming you're not coding up something from scratch. And as we go through the checklist, I'm going to be kind of checking in on that and helping you to think through the decision of what platform you might choose if you haven't done so already. In terms of objectives, overall, my objective is I want to support you to start planning an e-commerce store. By the end of the session, you'll, I hope, be able to describe what success looks like for your e-commerce store. I'm going to give you a checklist that helps you to understand what you'll need to do in order to launch that store. And I anticipate that going through this with me, you'll be able to start knowing which areas of that checklist you need to be getting working on first. Lastly, in terms of exclusions, I'm not going to teach you platform-specific steps for building a store. You could choose from a whole range of them, so it's difficult for us to know how to pitch it if we're going to do that. So what I'm going to do instead is talk about general steps, which you can use on any platform. I'm not going to give you all the answers.
Quick.
Sorry. This session is about giving you some questions and hopefully to empower you to answer them yourself, and potentially to be able to seek support from people to help you along the way. And I guess I don't know everything. E-commerce is a really big area, so I'm only really going to be covering the basics of e-commerce at this point. But I'm hoping that through doing that, I'll give you the confidence to start exploring further on your own. Okay, so I want to briefly talk about the case study. So there's a business that we've been working with for 5 years now. It's called Hometown Rochester. It's a bricks and mortar store on Rochester High Street. They describe themselves as the most colourful quilt shop in Kent, specialists in patchwork and quilting fabrics, haberdashery and quilt workshops. So we first worked with Hometown about 5 years ago when we built their website, just shortly after they moved into some new premises. And back then we were talking to Marion, who's the owner, about, you know, where did she want to go with her website? Did she want to add e-commerce? And at the time, she felt like it was something that she had in mind, but really struggled with the idea of how to replicate the in-store experience of going to Hometown online, and struggled with the idea of sort of managing over 2,000 products through e-commerce. So it was something that was sort of put on the back burner for Marion for a number of years. And then COVID-19 hit, and you know, I'm sure a number of you in the audience have had, you know, put your own stories about how it's affected your business. And certainly for Marion, it meant closing the doors to Hometown in Rochester High Street, and to consider how she was going to, you know, continue the business, how she was going to keep it alive through an indefinite period of lockdown. So to kick things off, what Marion did was she started doing telesales. So she's quite confident managing her own websites. She built a page, and she put up these lovely, on the left-hand side, these lovely packs of fabrics, coordinated fabrics that she imagined that her customers would want to purchase as a project. So she put it on the site, gave a price, and allowed people to make an order over the phone. And that was great. But what Marion quickly found was that she spent the whole day on the phone to people and trying to fulfill orders, and sort of ultimately the average transaction value for these phone calls was relatively low. So she was finding that she was doing a lot of talking, but not actually generating that much revenue. And so we made contact kind of coincidentally to say, you know, how can we help? And what became of that was a move to an e-commerce store. So on the right hand side of the slide there, you can see that we've taken that product available via telesales and we've put it available through e-commerce. We use Squarespace to do that, which is the platform that Marion had her website built on. It was the simplest way to achieve it at the time. It's not necessarily our recommendation for an e-commerce platform. So I'm going to talk about Marion's experience as I go through the checklist, just to try and make that checklist a bit more concrete and give you some things to think about. What I wanted to do now, though, before we jump into the checklist, is just to take a few moments to help you to think about what success might look like for you. In the KITC, we like using the sunshine charts, that's what we call them, to help businesses to think through where they want to take their business over a range of time horizons. So we want to, often what we do is we start with thinking about, well, what does the future look like? Looking out, what's a sort of a big goal that we'd like to achieve? And I can't remember exactly the value, but I do remember Marion wanted to get to a point where post-COVID, when everything went back to normal, she wanted e-commerce to be a part of her business, and to drive about a 10% increase in overall sales through e-commerce. So that was Marion's overall objective. That was sort of the vision she was looking towards. Then what we wanted to do is to try and understand how can we help to break that journey down for Marion. What could we do so that there's some things she could do immediately, some things she can be planning for, and all the while kind of moving towards that future state. So the sort of the now part for Marion was about, let's replace phone orders with kind of an easy to use e-commerce store. Let's add that to the existing website, and then that will give a way to start moving towards that goal of increasing overall sales. I spoke to Marion yesterday, and she gave me some interesting stats, which she gave me permission to share with you. That after the first month of sales, actually, what she's found is her e-commerce store, the average transaction value has doubled compared to the in-store, so the average in-store ATV pre-COVID. So she's super pleased about that, and I guess that's partly to do with the mix of products that she's put on there, but also perhaps just that people tend to spend differently online. And she's found that in the first month she saw a 200% increase on sales compared to April, and I think we have to bear in mind that April was a lockdown month, so the shop was closed. So really we're talking about an increase based on the adding e-com to telesales. But one thing Marion did say was that actually, if she looked back at the average sales pre-COVID, the telesales plus e-com was actually making about 30% of that. So still, actually, if you took, she's making 30% of her previous sales predominantly online, she's already beating that increase in overall sales goal. So the advantage of doing this and bringing in data helps you to adjust your strategy and think, well, okay, that's where we start. Where do we go next? And again, I'd really like you to take some time as we go through this presentation to start thinking about, well, where do you want to take e-commerce for your business? The other tool we use within our consultancy is called the Business Model Canvas. I'm not going to dwell on it. There's a lot of resource online if it's something that interests you. It's simply a way to describe your business model. So we did that for Marion. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but I just wanted to highlight the key points. Her value proposition within the store. She describes it as the experience being kids in a sweet shop for fabric geeks. And that's built through having great products and an expert knowledge, but crucially the ability to kind of put together and explore the products in store. So not being a quilt maker myself, I've seen how people do this, and they go and collect bits of fabric and they hold them up to one another and they start thinking about how that might go together in a quilt. And that's a very sort of unique experience within her in-store that she's able to do through having an in-store stock. So then she also offers in-store training program. So then we started thinking about who are the customer segments for the store now. And kind of the big one were fabric geeks, and that's sort of how Marion lovingly describes a big chunk of her market. And these are the people who just love going in there and love spending time with the products and making projects. Added to that, loyal locals, so people who come in a lot, who maybe aren't kind of hardcore quilt makers, but still make use of the shop. And then also visitors to Rochester, people who kind of come in, experience the store, and then go off to wherever they live in the country. And the reason why we talked about this was trying to understand how might e-commerce change the value proposition. So in Marion's case, it was very difficult for customers in an online sense to pull together a project to compare fabrics. But there were other ways to think about it, which we're going to talk about. And then also thinking about, is there a slightly different target market for the e-commerce store? So for Marion, she really felt that at this stage during COVID, it's all about the loyal locals. It's all about supporting those people that kind of come back time and time again, but also potentially widening it up to the rest of the country and kind of those people who know about Hometown from their previous visits there. So again, at this point, I'm just going to pause just for a couple of, maybe a minute or so, to give yourselves the chance to kind of ponder these questions. So the questions being, what do you want e-commerce to achieve for your business in the long term? And can you quantify this in some way? Can you break this down to some short-term goals? What would this look like? And what would you like to achieve in the next few months? What's your value proposition at the moment? How does this translate into e-commerce? Who are your target customer segments, and do you need to target different segments with e-commerce? And how ready are you? I mean, mentally, there's a lot of learning you're going to have to do. There's a lot of sort of energy you're going to have to put into this. Physically, that's yourself, but also physically in terms of what you've got in store. Financially, you know, there may be implications there. How ready are you for all these changes? And who at this stage have you got in mind that might be able to support you? So I'm just going to pause and mute myself just for 1 minute, just to give you a chance to sort of self-reflect on those points before I jump into the checklist. Okay, that's been about a minute. At a slight disadvantage when I would normally do this in person. You can see when people are kind of heads down scribbling and when people have started to look up and look around the room. So apologies if you're still deep in thought, but we'll move on now, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to come back and continue that reflection later. Okay, so we're going to move on now to talk about our e-commerce checklist. So this checklist is comprised of lists of questions that will help you to self-assess your readiness for launching an e-commerce store. It's broken down into 5 sections: product, stock, payment, fulfillment, and legal. The questions that in each section are designed to help you think through and plan your e-commerce implementation before you actually start it. Some questions relate to things that you'll need to do digitally. Others are more grounded in the physical parts of e-commerce, and I guess those steps will perhaps be the most familiar and easier for you to achieve if you haven't got any e-commerce experience. So as I pass through this list, I'll also begin to highlight some of what we call the digital steps that we think you'll need to take in order to implement your e-commerce store. So having got yourself prepared, we'll show you and help you to understand what the steps are to actually make use of that planning. I mean, at this stage, I should say this isn't designed to be an exhaustive list. This is a list that we think will work broadly for lots of different types of businesses, depending upon your context and what you want to achieve. There may well be other things that you would want to consider in moving forward and doing that planning. What I'm going to ask you to do as we go through it is that for each question, answer it as a yes, a no, or a maybe. So the ones that are yeses are, yep, completely got that covered, 100% confident, this doesn't apply to me, and yeah, I'm ready for that. The maybes, you know, I've done some of this, or I haven't done it, but I know how to do it. It's pretty easy to do. The no's are, whoa, okay, never even thought about that before, or I have thought about that, and wow, it's going to be hard to do. or I'm really going to need some help in order to make that work. So yeah, as we go through, I'd ask you just to bear that in mind, and at the end of each section, I'll just pause for a few moments to allow you to just go back over and quickly make that RAG scoring. I guess our hope here is that you can start taking maybe a risk-based approach to launching your e-commerce store. It might be that actually you can look at some of these and go, well, that's what I would need in an ideal world to achieve my objectives in the future, but actually I could probably get away with launching now and working towards sort of making those ambers and reds green. So again, that's a very personal decision, but hopefully just presenting it like that gives you the opportunity to manage that risk in that way. So I'm going to jump now into product. We're going to spend about 30 minutes in this section. So the most time of all the 5 will be about 10 minutes for each of the other sections. There's 5 what we think are essential questions that you should be able to answer. And then there are some more advanced or optional areas that you may or may want to consider. So let's start off with the first question. So I know what products I'm going to sell online. That feels like a pretty obvious question. And your gut reaction might be, yeah, I know that's easy. Of course I know what products I'm going to put online. But I will, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the discussions we had with Marion to try and give you some context around that. There we go. So just going back to Marion's use case, her value proposition, as we talked about, was all about visual appeal. It was about great products, and crucially, this idea of being able to match fabrics in store. And that Marion really didn't think that was going to translate well. There's things like issues with color fidelity, that you look at it on the screen and it turns up and it's a different color. How can customers test that quality? And how do they get the advice that they would normally get in store? We also sort of decided that in that analysis, Marion wanted to target those loyal locals, and she felt that the chances are this segment would be on the hunt for a project to sort of keep them sane during lockdown. And so the idea, even before we started talking about e-commerce, was born of actually, rather than trying to put up 2,000 different products onto the store, actually what Marion wanted to do was to prioritize these fabric collections that should allow her customers to create these projects, and effectively Marion's already done the work of matching them on their behalf. So at this point, I think it would be great for yourselves to think about what does that look like for you. You might have loads of products, you might only have a small number. Some of those products might well be easier to post than others. One of the considerations that we'll talk about later that Marion had was she didn't, at the height of the lockdown, want to spend any time in a post office. So she designed her collection of products so that she could actually post it through a post box. Other considerations are that some of your products might sell better than others. You'll know that from your experience in store. But equally, you'll know that some products might take more configuration than others. They might take a little bit more selling, a little bit more customer service. So I'd encourage you, when addressing this question, to make a list. Start building a list of all of the products that you think would work through e-commerce. And we'll add considerations to this list as we go. And I would suggest, if you've got pen and paper to hand, now's the time to start kind of populating that list. And one of the first steps I would suggest you do is to start prioritizing that sort of long list, if you like. We tend to use a thing called Moscow. So that's must, should, could, and realistically won't. So as you're creating that list, think about what are the products that you absolutely must have on your store that your customers wouldn't recognize you without them. What are the things that, yeah, you should put on, they're really important, and your customers would be disappointed perhaps if they weren't there. What about there might be some other ones that, okay, we could, when the time is right, when we've got time, we might then start adding those on. And then realistically, there's ones that, it's just not worth the hassle. Let's not bother putting those on there. And I'd encourage you to just put your mind back to those sort of shorter term and longer term objectives that we talked about in the sunshine chart. Think about, can you launch quickly with just a few key products and then add others later on? Certainly that was a process that Marion had to kind of go through in her mind to get to a point where she was confident to launch with a certain subset of products. And obviously now she's, with the benefit of seeing the sales, is able to then tweak that moving forwards. So I think this is the first big question that you're going to need to answer. And hopefully you're all scribbling away lists of products that you're thinking, yeah, those are the right ones for my store. So we're going to cover the next two together in terms of having high quality copy to describe those products and high quality images to describe those products. Obviously, again, thinking about what your customers do in store, they've got the benefit of holding the products, they've got the benefit of asking you questions about them, they've got the benefit of asking others questions about them. So when you're thinking about e-commerce, you're restricted. You only have you have to rely on what you can show people in pictures and what you can describe to them in words. One of the things about an e-commerce platform, which is what I'm assuming you're all going to be using, is that you're in some way at least restricted by how you display a product. The platform will give you a selection of templates, and those templates will show your products in a certain way. So, and we'll come on to that later on. But the key things were, and thinking about Marion's experience, she knew that she couldn't give that kind of sweetie shop feel to the physical store, and that the customers wouldn't get that feel for the true color and quality of the fabric. So what she's done is, again, by picking those fabrics, she's pre-selected that, but she's also taken some nice pictures, she's laid them out nicely, she's giving you lots of information about how those different fabrics look in combination, and you can't quite see it, but the last picture here, she's sort of giving you an idea of what it's going to look like when you open the envelope. And she's just taken those pictures on an iPhone, and so we don't necessarily need much more than that in order to take those high copy images. Then the other thing that Marion's done is, she knows her customers. She's spent lots of time in the shop, as I'm sure you know your customers. She knows how to describe her products. She kind of preempts the questions she might expect to receive in the store. And she's written some great content that will, almost a little mini sales pitch for each of those products. And again, you'll know best what that looks like, and potentially if you're not if writing stuff isn't your forte, or taking pictures isn't your forte, perhaps that's something to note down, that you might need some support from others to help you with that. And we'll revisit the content of the copy later on. So the other thing that that we discovered, and that was worth noting, I think, in our experience with Marion, was the need to know which products are unique products and which products are variants of a key product. So again, this is probably familiar to you, those of you who are existing physical retailers. But for Marion, her standalone project, and I'm sure you're getting bored of seeing these pictures of the cut fabric, this is a standalone product. You either like it and buy it, or you don't and you buy something else. But she also had what we call a variant product, and that's where if you're making a quilt, you'll need some kind of backing fabric to go on the other side of the quilt. Now Marion stocks a few different varieties of these fabrics, but basically they are made by a manufacturer. They use a standard weave, a standard weight, a standard quality, but they're produced in a range of colours. So in this case, this is a variant product. So the actual fabric is the same, but it's coloured in a range of different ways. You can see that these are named, and the customer coming to the e-commerce store is able to then say, okay, I want this product, and I want this product in gold, as an example. So again, it's worth thinking about that list of products that you're starting to build, and just start marking against them. Is that a variant? Is that a unique product? And it's just, that will be really useful for when it comes to populating your store. And I guess, you know, for your variant products, you're only going to have to write that description once for all of that group of products, but you probably will potentially need to have different images to describe each of the variants. So for in Marion's case, she had a different color swatch to represent each of these, which is then displayed when you click on it. Now, the last thing, which is again slightly advanced thing to consider, is having an understanding of what the information is that you'll need from your customers when they're purchasing your products. This might not relate to everyone in the audience, but I'll give you an example that we came across for the hometown implementation. So again, I hold my hands up, and Marion said she might join us, and I apologise if I get this wrong again, Marion. But if you're ordering fabric from Hometown, there's a number of different ways you can order it. So it's sold in quarter meters, but there's two different ways of cutting a quarter meter. One is to cut it the length of the fabric, so 25 centimeters down, cut across. That's called a long quarter. Whereas the other option is called a fat quarter, which is taking the whole meter of fabric and quartering that. So you end up with a fatter quarter, I guess. Now, if you're a quilter, you'll most likely know this. I certainly didn't until Marion explained it to me and had to explain it to me again. But one of the things is that makes it complicated when you're trying to sell fabric online. In the physical store, Marion and her team could walk people through that process and explain it to them. Online they can't, and you're having to produce some copy, like I'm showing here on screen, which kind of educates the customer to understand that process. But also, in this case, we had to give them an option. So when I tried to buy this primrose piece of backing fabric, and I said I wanted one, what we had to design was a form that jumps up and says, okay, you're buying 1/4 of this fabric. Do you want a fat quarter? Because we're going to cut it as a thin quarter otherwise. And basically I have the option to click that button and say, yep, I'd like that as a fat quarter, please. And if I don't click the button, then Marion and her team will cut it as a thin quarter. Again, this is super specific to quilting, but there might well be other things that you need to know when you're selling your products that is specific to an individual product. We'll talk about in a later section things you'll need to know more generally about your customer when you're fulfilling their order, such as where they live. But this is thinking about, are there certain things that you'll need to know in order to configure the order. And so again, on your list of products, having that just noted down to say, we're actually right, for this product, we're going to need some kind of way of capturing this piece of information. Great, so we've gone through the first 5 questions, and at this point, then you're most likely ready to perform the first digital step, and that's to start populating your product catalogue. So I'm assuming that those of you that are here haven't made a decision yet about what platform you're going to use, and that's absolutely great. but equally, you may well have made that decision, or it's been made for you by where your website is. But the key thing to remember is that you're going to have a limited amount of control over the layout of your products. Effectively, what you do in this step is you give the underlying platform all the information it needs. You input that into a form. So you tell it what the key features, the main images are. You give it the sort of sub images to display as thumbnails. You give it information like the price and the copy you want to display alongside that product. And then the platform will display that product for you according to the template that you selected. So for those of you that haven't made that decision about platform, this is a really key point to start thinking about. How do you want to display your product information? Having made that list and started to think about the things that you're going to want to show, what do you want it to look like? And it's time, that might be a useful way to then start looking at a range of different platforms and the different templates they offer. Most of them will give you the option to look at a sample store as using a particular template, so it'll give you a feel for what your products could look like. Okay, excuse me. So we're now going to go on to the final 4 questions of the product section, talking about the sort of the more optional or potentially advanced ways that you could manage products on your store. So the first of these is having some knowledge of how you want to categorize or tag your products. So without any form of categorization, your shop front will just show all of your products. And that might be totally fine for you. You might have a limited number of products, and actually chucking them all in one place is the appropriate thing to do. And if so, great, job done. I'll give you permission to go and make a cup of tea for a few moments. But I think probably likelihood is that there might be some people here that actually need to be more sophisticated in the way that they kind of carve up their shop and display those products to different people. So, and that's a case of wanting to show different pages with particular products on it. Again, how you actually do this will be somewhat dependent upon the platform you choose, and also dependent upon the way that you want to sort of split apart your products. So to give you a concrete example, the image here, that is taken from one of the pages on Marion's store, which is the kind of here's all of our stuff. But actually there's pages that just simply have the fabric bundles, and that's configured by all of these products have been categorized under the category fabric bundle, and it allows you to easily populate a page with all of those products. These 2 products have been categorized with kits, so again you can create that specific page to show just those products. So again, with your list of products, it's a good time to start thinking about, are there particular categories that jump out to you? Products can be in multiple categories depending upon platform, but generally speaking they can. So how are you wanting to kind of group your products? And it's a nice way to start thinking about that before you start building the store, because it will give you an idea of what pages you're going to need to build during the digital step of populating the products. The next thing, and I guess this is this is really familiar to those of you doing physical retailing, is how can we help people to how can you do cross-selling or upselling? So obviously as a retailer you want the sort of the average transaction value to be as large as possible. So being able to help your customers to find other products that might work really well with the product they're buying, or to find potentially more premium products that have additional features that they might be interested in, is a really key way of doing that. And this is particularly important because you will have fixed costs involved in fulfilling every single order. So having an opportunity to cross-sell and upsell is really important. So again, I'm going to give you an example from Marion's store. I mentioned already, and again, this was part of my education in quilt making, that if you were to buy one of these fabric packs, what you would also need alongside the fat quarters of fabric would be some kind of backing fabric. So that's these 3 boxes at the bottom, and there's a linen one, a twist one, or a dimples one. And you'll also need some kind of thread to sew it all together. So you can see here that the product template that Marion was using gives 2 ways to achieve that cross-sell. And I'll zoom in a little bit. The first way is to add into the description. So what Marion did in the description for this product is to add a link to say, you'll also probably want to have some kind of coordinating thread to go along with your fabric. And that allows the customer to go in and say, yep, this is the, follow that link and say, I want Marion, I would like you to coordinate some thread that goes with the order that I'm making. And then Marion will use her judgment to provide you with the right one. The other way of doing this is a sort of you might also like feature that comes with Squarespace, and I would imagine that most, if not all, of the e-commerce platforms have the same kind of feature, where you're able to say, for a given product, here are the companion products, if you like. Here are the ones that I'd like to show my customers. And in this configuration, Marion's trying to cross-sell. She's trying to help people to find those backing fabrics, but potentially in your situation, you might be trying to use this to upsell, to provide alternative products that you think your customers may want to purchase instead. Again, at this point, in terms of that list of products, it's worth thinking about that, and it's worth thinking about, is that a big part of your strategy for your online sales to achieve higher order values through upselling or cross-selling? And if it is, it's really worth then thinking about what the different platforms offer. So one of the things we found with Marion's store was that Squarespace did offer this feature, the you might also like feature, but you had to pay for it. So it cost an extra £5 a month to reach that level of subscription that allowed her to use this feature. And that's quite often the case with an e-commerce platform, that they'll offer you a certain amount of functionality for a certain price, and then they'll upsell you into additional functionality which will help you do additional things. So again, it's something that if you haven't made that platform decision yet, this is a really key thing to start thinking about. And also in that list of products, to start thinking about how do they link, maybe draw some arrows to products that you might want to sell together. So also part of your sort of sales strategy is the ability to feature some of your products more prominently. So I guess coming back to your list of products, those must-haves that really are your signature products, those are the things you might want to highlight on your website more than the other products potentially. This isn't something that Marion had a particular need of in her store, and actually the template she used wouldn't allow her to do this very easily. But this is an example that I just grabbed from one of the Shopify display sites, and you can see there's sort of a promotion there for a particular product for Father's Day, I think it was, and then these are the promoted items, which are bigger and bolder than the non-promoted items, I suppose you'd say, down here. So again, as you're thinking about your products, think about which are the ones that you want to put up in front and center on the store, and help people to discover more quickly what are your kind of high sales items. And this also should factor into your decision over what platform you want to choose. And again, this was something that was tricky with the template that Marion chose. Oh no, sorry, Marion didn't choose it. Marion was it was left over from her website, so again, she didn't have much choice. Potentially you do, so it's just thinking about is this option important to you? So if it is, make sure that template has it. So the last section, the last question I'm going to ask in this product section is about keywords, and about, do you know what the keywords are that your target customers will relate to your products? This is, again, it's a strategy question. Are you are you going to be relying in some way on people using a Google search to find you, what we would call native search? Or are you expecting people to know who you are? They know your store, they're a loyal local of yours. They'll be coming to your store anyway because they want to shop with you, and they're going to find your products through discovery on the store. Versus the people who don't know about you and will discover you through making a search for the product that you stock. Now, it depends really where you sit on that. And I would assume that all of you would be happy for customers to find you through a Google search. But equally, that may not be your primary strategy for sales. So thinking about Marion, and to sort of give you a concrete example, her initial strategy anyway was that native search would be nice. If people find her through search, fab. But actually, she's going to use her social media platform. She uses Instagram a lot. She's going to publicize the store there. And she's got mailing lists and things like that for her loyal locals. So really, she was looking at her store being a way to serve those people who already know about her and already want to shop with her. So in this case, what she did, and whatever platform you use will have some kind of SEO or search engine optimization functionality. What she did was just leave it up to the platform. So she'd written some lovely copy, as I showed you earlier, which described the product. And what Squarespace in this instance does is it presents information to Google in a way that Google understands and will make it easier for people to find that product using the keywords that is contained in that copy. Marion's actually said that she's had quite a few customers find her through native search, and I think that's partly because of the keywords that Marion has already put kind of naturally in her copy. If you want to, if you're using Squarespace, you have the option to do some more specific targeted titles and descriptions for each of your products, and I'm sure that a lot of the other platforms will offer you similar functionality. So again, at this point, at this planning stage, it's worth thinking through, is SEO important to you? If it is, for your list of products, what are the sort of keywords you're expecting people to find you with? And with that known, that's something that you're going to want to use to write your descriptions of the products around and the titles of the products around. If that's not something that you're comfortable with or you've had a lot of experience in, there are lots of SEO specialists around, or maybe even copywriters who can help you to do that. And that's would be particularly important if this idea of native search is a really key part of your strategy for people to find you. Great. Okay. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. Well, in fact, actually, look, well done. We've made it through the first and most important part of our checklist. So what I'll do at this point is I'll give my voice a rest for a couple of moments, and I'll just let you just go through those questions again. And if you've not done so already, if you've got a piece of paper, just mark off, where are you? Is it a yes? Is it a no? Is it a maybe? And hopefully it will start to give you some idea of the priorities that you're going to need to set for yourself when you move forward with this project. So I'll just mute myself for a second whilst I take a drink, and I'll give you a couple of minutes, sort of 30 seconds to think about that. Okay, great. Sorry for those of you that are still head down thinking about that stuff, but let's jump on to the next section, which is about product. So before it's about, we've done product, it's about stock. So one of the key decisions you're going to need to make at this stage is how will you hold stock for your e-commerce store? Broadly speaking, there's two ways you can do that. And again, I'm assuming here that you have a physical bricks and mortar store alongside your e-commerce. So the decision would be you either have a shared stock, so you're sharing that with your in-store stock, or you have a dedicated stock. So you have an area of your stockroom which is specifically for your e-commerce store only. So obviously the thing we're really trying to avoid is someone buying the last item of something online and then that same product being sold immediately or sometime later before it's fulfilled in your bricks and mortar store. You don't want to be in that situation where you're having to let someone down that actually you said you had the product, but actually now you've sold it to someone else. So that's quite a big risk, and certainly I've talked to a few customers in the past where they've made the move to add e-commerce to a physical store. They've had that problem, and it's all about managing stock. So yeah, and I guess the only way to 100% avoid that scenario is to hold that dedicated stock, but that might not be possible given your situation, your context, and certainly with Marion, it wasn't feasible. Pretty much all of the stock is on display to customers, making that visual display. So it wouldn't be possible to take that dedicated stock and put it somewhere else. So kind of having made that decision, or sort of that decision having been made for you, let's take a look at the checklist. So again, this is broken down into, there are some essentials, there are things that you need to know, and I strongly suspect you already will know if you're already a retailer. And then I'm going to offer you 3 different strategies for managing your e-commerce stock, which is relevant mostly to if you're using a shared stock environment. So in terms of the essentials, I'll cover these both together. And again, apologies if this is really obvious to you, but you'll need to know how quickly you can get an item in stock. So how quickly does it take the supplier to get an order to you, and also to have some kind of an idea of how quickly that item sells. Now, obviously, that's going to be a bit different online. You might find things sell quicker online versus your physical store. But I guess you need to make some kind of a guess at that. And that, or therefore, the combination of those two answers will help you to understand how much stock do I need to kind of keep in order to manage demand and supply for those products. So again, it might be worth, when you've got that list of products that you're compiling, it would be worth starting to think about noting on there. Is it a fast seller? Is it a slow stocker? And start to just think about that, and that'll be relevant for when we talk about these different strategies. So let's walk through these one by one. The first is fully synchronized. So in order to make this work, what you really need is a process that allows you to keep an accurate register of your physical stock, and I'll walk you through what I mean by that. So let's imagine that you've just taken the delivery of an item, it doesn't matter which, let's call it an item of fabric, whatever. You've got 300 of those items in stock. When you launch your store, your online store, in a synchronized mode, what you'll need to do as you launch it is to synchronize. So you'll need to tell your e-commerce platform, right, I've got 300 possible items that I can sell. And that's my digital inventory, which reflects my physical inventory. Excuse me, my physical stock. So let's imagine yippee, someone's bought an item from your from your online store. So suddenly your digital inventory has gone down to 299. Okay, you're still saying 300 in stock, but actually it is still in stock until you fulfill that order. So you pick that item, package it up, send it off to the customer. Great, with no work done, you're still in sync. You've got 299 physical items, which is reflected in your digital inventory already. Now, where this gets complicated is then someone comes into the store and they buy one of these items. Whoa, suddenly you've got 298 in your physical stock. But the issue is that your digital inventory is still sat at 299. So that's okay when you've got 300 of them, but obviously when you've got a much smaller number, that's bringing you to within the risk of double selling that the last item is in sight. So what you need to do at that point is have some kind of process that when something is sold physically in store, that you need to then resynchronize and tell your digital inventory, as I've done there, that actually we sold one and it didn't go through the e-commerce platform. Let's just imagine you've had a really great day and you've sold the majority of your stock. What's good about this this system is that most e-commerce stores will tell you, you've got low stock. You'll be able to set the low stock warning level, which will say at a certain point, send you an email and say, hey, you're getting pretty low on this item. You might want to think about restocking it. Now that's great because actually it means that the system is managing it for you. It's not reliant on you going and checking how much is in stock. So you can, so long as you're synchronizing your physical stock and your digital inventory as you go, you can rely on those low stock warnings for help. So this is actually the approach that Marion is planning to take. She's very keen not to double sell items, and she wants to make sure that she keeps that digital inventory up to date. So she's going to come up with a process whereby when products are sold over the till, through the till, there will be a mechanism for staff to go in and just update that digital inventory as she goes. One other way to do that potentially is to implement some kind of electronic point of sale system, which would automatically do that for you, but that's out of scope really for this presentation. So the other option is what I'm calling buffered, and that's where you've got a process where you kind of know roughly how much stock you've got for each item. You haven't got specific numbers, you've not done a really detailed stock take, but you know pretty much, you can eyeball it and go, I know pretty much how many items I've got there. In that case, same thing happens, you get an order of 300 items. What you would do is allocate some of those items to your digital inventory. So not all of them, just to some of them. And you wouldn't necessarily take those out of physical stock. You're just saying, okay, I'm going to tell the digital inventory I've got 10. So then what happens is, yay, people start buying it, you're selling them, the digital inventory is dropping, and you're fulfilling these things. Oh, hold on, suddenly you've got 5 left in your digital inventory. And because you set it up this way, the system now sends you an email to say, hey, you've only got 5 left in your digital inventory. And that's really your prompt to go, okay, cool, let's just take a look. Oh, fine, look, we've got, we had 300 in actually, so now let's just say we've got 295 in stock. So yeah, that's fine. Oh, and what I thought was happening in the animation was that then you can then allocate another chunk of that physical stock to the inventory. So in this way, what you're doing is you're using the system to sell chunks of that stock and triggering you to go and check to make sure you don't need to buy any more. And obviously, as you're selling it physically, you're also then able to go eyeball it and go, right, okay, I think I know when I need to order some more stock. But again, you're still getting the benefit of low stock warnings from the sales platform, but you're not having to do the work of keeping it in sync every single time you sell a product, which, I think depending on how many products you're selling could be quite a big task. So your last option is what I've been calling just in time. And that's a process, that's where you've got a process that is pretty robust, that lets you detect when I'm running low on stock. So you might not know how many you've got in stock, but you know when you're going to run out. You know that when you should order that, and you kind of know that already because that's how you're operating potentially in the store. So in this situation, you get a delivery and you've got 300 physical stock, but as far as the digital inventory is concerned, there's an infinite number of products. It will just carry on selling so long as customers want to buy it. So that's the key difference, is that you're effectively not telling the digital your online store how much you have in inventory. And what you're having to do is monitor this yourself, so that when you say get down to say 10 items in stock, you're the person, or one of your staff is the person that's saying, oh, low stock, crikey, we need to get another delivery in, and you know what, we should probably pull the plug on online sales. So we should probably tell the digital inventory, nah, sorry, we're out of stock, we've run out of stock there, and effectively throw the circuit breaker and stop selling online until you get some more physical stock in. So that ultimately is a less risky way of managing the stock. Sorry, no, it's a much more risky way of managing the stock. What I meant to say was a much less effort involved in synchronizing and managing stock. But it does mean that you're ultimately responsible for recognizing when you're getting low on physical stock. And you need to get in there first and stop people buying stock that doesn't exist before they do. So there's a sort of a much different effort to risk ratio compared to, say, buffered and synchronized. So and I guess those are three strategies that we can think of. You as experienced retailers may have other ones that you can contribute to us. But one of the things to think about is you don't necessarily need to do just one. You could certainly take a hybrid approach, and that's possibly the best way to do it. You might use synchronized stock management for those items that you hold very limited stock of, or that are particularly quick selling, and that you really want to make sure you're using the safest way of managing that stock. For other products, you might use buffered for items that are quick selling, but you can easily get them back in stock. So you're balancing the amount of work that you need to do to keep that in sync, but you're still making use of the system to give you a nudge every now and again to say, hey, you should probably check the stock. And then for those items that you've always got in stock, you never run out of it, because you're always really good at monitoring that. That's possibly for those products, it's probably worth just using a just-in-time method. Reduce that amount of work that you have to do to keep your stock up to date and avoid double selling. So again, with this list that I keep referring back to of products that you're making, now might be a good moment to start thinking about which way of managing stock are you going to adopt, or is there another way that we haven't mentioned here that you would like to use? Great, and now you're on to digital step 2, which is, having populated your inventory into your e-commerce platform, you now have the option of, or the job, if you like, of doing stock take if you're doing synchronized, or allocating if you're doing buffered, or just saying, hey, go for it, there's loads. Put infinite down for stock for the just-in-time strategy. But that's a digital task that you'd need to perform, and you can see here on the slide I'm showing you that this is one of the products in Marion's store where you can put a very specific stock number. And as I've said, what Marion did was she did a detailed stock check before she launched the store, and she's keeping them in sync from there. I know there was a question that I had a few moments ago around just someone didn't catch what platform I'm talking about here. So actually, what you're seeing now is behind the scenes on a Squarespace e-commerce store. And again, I'm only using Squarespace as an example because I have one to hand. It's not necessary to say that Squarespace is the one to choose, but certainly this is one platform that gives those options that allow those three strategies to work. Brilliant, well done. You've made it through another section. Again, I'm going to take a drink, and I'm going to pause here for sort of a minute, and I'd encourage you to just review what I've just said. Just have a look at those questions, start thinking about RAG scores for those, and noting down, what do you think about those strategies for managing stock? How are you going to apply that to your products? Okay, that was a pretty quick minute, but I think we'll move on to the next section. If I can get my computer to work. There we go. Okay, we're now going to talk about payment. So having selected your products, uploaded to your e-commerce platform of choice, decided on your stock management process, and set up that stock, the step you need next before you actually open the store is you want, obviously, your customers to be able to pay you for the products that they want to buy from you. So step one of that is really critical. It's the first consideration is that you need some kind of payment gateway in order to take a card payment. So you may have an idea in your mind about which payment gateway you want to use. You may have heard of some. And certainly your choice of e-commerce platform will in some way dictate what options you have. So with Marion's store, she was using Squarespace, as I've said, and she only had the option of PayPal or Stripe, and really that was it. If you choose something like Shopify, which is what I'm taking a screenshot here, there's a whole load of other things that you can use. There's Amazon Pay, there's a whole load of other, Sage Pay, there's a whole load of other ones that I've never heard of before, and that I guess you would use in specific circumstances. The thing to understand though, before you kind of move forwards from this point, is there will be costs involved. Most payment gateways will levy some kind of per transaction fee or some kind of percentage commission or a combination thereof. Some may even have a sort of annual subscription. And there's also the e-commerce platform itself, which often levies some kind of fee. So again, with Squarespace, at a certain subscription level, Squarespace actually levies a 2% commission on all sales. That becomes 0% when you get to a higher level of subscription. I have a suspicion, I haven't looked into it, but I think Shopify is quite similar. I'm sure the other ones are. So at this point, it's about thinking through what are those costs, and how does that affect the margins that you have for your products. And again, that might be factor into your prioritization of the products that you want to put on an e-commerce store, that potentially they are you've got slightly thinner margins on you going down e-com than you do with your in-store products. I guess it depends upon how you attribute your costs. But certainly this is a consideration that I'd encourage you to make at this stage about, will your product work going through e-commerce if you're having to pay out these transaction fees, and particularly how does that compare to, say, transaction fees you're being charged, for example, credit card payments in your physical store. So something only you can answer, but it'd be something that would be worth just noting down on that list of products that you've been building up. So with that decision made, the other thing you need to think about is, your customer is going through some kind of checkout process. So you're capturing. You need to know what information you want from your customers at checkout, so that you can fulfill their order. So generally speaking, in order to integrate with a payment platform, you're going to need to capture information like name and address and billing address, shipping address, that kind of stuff. But at this point, it's worth thinking through, is there other information you particularly require? that's not necessarily specific to a product, but specific to your store in general. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head. I guess when I'm on fuel oil for my central heating, so I have to order a tanker to come up and deliver it to my house. So irrespective of what grade of fuel oil I buy, I need to tell them what size tanker they can get up to my house. And that's something that I provide to them when I buy online at checkout to help them fulfill my order. So other delivery instructions might be an example. So again, very specific to your business and potentially may not be relevant, but potentially it's something that you would capture on a by product basis. So the next thing to think about is promotions and discounts that you want to offer your customers, and trying to think about what's your sales strategy here. You may make a lot of use of promotions in your physical store. How will that relate to products that you want to put online? So generally speaking, there's two ways of doing that. There's the concept of an item being on sale and discount codes that you can utilize. So here's an example from Marion's store. She's put this fabric on sale. You can tell it's on sale because it's got a little button at the top right which says sale. The original price was £13.95, but you can pick it up for £8. So that's something that you can apply on a item by item basis, and you can create sales. And I guess it's probably most appropriate when you want to create a sale for individual products. If you wanted to do it for a whole category of products with an e-com store, what you're probably looking at is using some kind of discount code. So again, this is an area where you're going to need to do a bit of research. If this is what you want to use, this is going to be a big part of your strategy. You need to do a bit of research about how your platform does this. I've just grabbed this from Squarespace just to give you an example. And what they really say about it is that using discount codes, you can make much more targeted offers. You can apply those offers to entire orders, to orders over a set amount, to an individual product, or indeed to product categories. So, for example, if you wanted to do a 20% discount on all fabric packs, the best way to do that would be through a product code that your customer would enter at checkout time. And you can do all sorts of interesting things that's more sophisticated than just changing the spot price. You can add free shipping and it will automatically deduct the right amount. You can do a percentage over a certain amount. You can do a monetary value. You can start doing limiting per customer. You can do some cross-sale type promotions. So there's lots you can do, but it is very much dependent upon your platform and your subscription level. So as an example, with Marion on her subscription level, she can do free shipping on any order, but she can't limit it to one per customer at her current subscription level. So if sort of discounting and making offers is a big part of your strategy, particularly for particular products, again, this is a moment where actually it's worth just noting that on your list of potential products, and also and trying to think about what sort of promotions you'd want to run, and using that as a way of discriminating between which platforms you might be looking at, and what sort of subscription costs you might be looking to incur to get that functionality. So what Marion did was she has done a free shipping offer for her customers. It actually started out at £30, and actually, the great thing about e-commerce is you can start sort of playing around with these things to see how changes affect customer behaviour. So she's up recently, in sort of response to her thinking about her margin, she's increased that to £50 to try and increase the average transaction value. So again, that's something that Marion could do with Squarespace given her subscription level. The next thing to think about is shipping. So obviously you've given someone a product they like, you've given them an option to purchase it. Now you've got the I don't want to say problem, it's a good thing, but you've got to now ship it to that individual, and you need some way of, unless you're going to provide free shipping, of calculating those shipping costs. So again, it would be really difficult for me to go into any particular depth in terms of shipping considerations, because it would be very much variable on what carrier you want to use. So this will be specific on, what size or weight of products are you going to be sending out? How quickly do you want them to arrive? Is there anything special about your product, or where you want to ship to? So do you want to ship abroad or just stick to the UK? And as I mentioned right at the beginning of this talk, Marion's consideration was that during lockdown, and I think things are changing, but she didn't want to go to a post office. So she was only offering delivery through second-class post. I believe that, specifically to the UK. And her selection of products meant that she was able to send those items through the postbox rather than having to go to the post office. But one of the things that you also need to consider is, how do you calculate those costs? As I've said, you can. What Marion did was she offered a free shipping over a certain amount, and she knew that her margins would support that. But below that amount, which was sort of £50, you've got some options. So you can either levy a standard charge per order. You could look at adding a charge for each item that the customer has in their shopping basket, or potentially a combination of those two. Or you could do things around how much it weighs, or sort of giving a particular price per item. And again, that's very specific to your platform choice. And it's going to be something that you need to start researching when you're making that choice. So again, making that concrete with Marion, as I've said, she chose second-class post. She made it a flat cost, which I can't remember what it was. I think it was £3, or whatever it was, to relate back to the cost of sending something through a second-class post, with a standard envelope that would fit into a UK post box. So she calculated that fixed rate, but also, and accepted that, if she, for instance, had to send 2 envelopes, that her, generally speaking, her margins would support that. And as I've said, she also offered a free shipping over £50. The other thing that is becoming really relevant is in-store pickup. So, bricks and mortar stores are reopening, and I'm to understand that Marion is currently opening her store in Rochester as we speak, or certainly did this morning. So one of the options that you could start offering customers is an in-store pickup. And that might really satisfy those people who don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time perusing your store and don't want to do a lot of time queuing, would rather purchase online and come down and get it. So again, that's another consideration that is particularly relevant to the here and now. And the last thing to say on this is having some idea of what's the minimum order value that you need to cover those fixed costs for fulfillment. We're going to talk about fulfillment next, but whenever an order comes in, you've got to go and pick it, you've got to go and pack it. There's cost of an envelope, there's cost of time to go and post it. It's worth, before you go too far, thinking through what is that minimum order value you need to make it worthwhile you actually fulfilling that order. And that's something that Marion put a decent amount of thought into, and her minimum order is £10. Originally she launched without a minimum order price, but was finding that there were lots of people ordering kind of really small amounts, a couple of quid's worth. And it was, she was spending a lot of time fulfilling those orders, and actually then from a margins perspective weren't worth doing. And most e-commerce platforms will give you the option to set that minimum order value. So having made all those decisions, and there's quite a few decisions to make, quite a lot of thought that you'll need to put into making those decisions, this opens up digital steps 3, 4, and 5. And again, that's very specific to the decisions you've made and also the platforms you've chosen. But basically, once you've got your merchant account for the merchant of your choice, your payment gateway of your choice, you need to set that up and integrate that with your e-commerce platform. And as I've said, if you've got a particular payment gateway in mind, just make sure before you go any further, that the e-commerce platform that you want to use will integrate with that. Having decided on your promotion strategy and defined what those promotions look like, you'll then need to set those up within the platform. And then having decided on your shipping options, you'll need to then start putting those together. Okay, section 3 done, 2 sections remaining. So I'm going to give you maybe 30 seconds at this point because I'm just aware of time. Just to quickly skim through this list of questions and ask yourself, is it red, is it amber, or is it green? Okay, that was a quick 30 seconds. Let's jump into fulfillment. I'm hoping I'm bringing you back to your comfort zones at this point, that we've shifted gears from purely digital considerations to some more practical, tangible matters. And I'm quite confident that you've already got a really clear idea, having started to think about that list of products, about packaging, that you know how you're going to safely package your orders for delivery. And as I said, that was one of the big considerations for Marion during the lockdown, was how she was going to package it, not just safely for her customers, but also to make it safe for her to post those orders. When I was looking, sort of researching this talk, I was really sort of quite surprised to find there wasn't any general COVID-19 packaging guidelines. That one of the things I would say at this point is I think it's probably worth just taking a look, making sure you're on the lookout for that. I've read recently of things like Waterstones needing to quarantine books that have been held by customers for 72 hours in order to make sure any virus in the surface will have died. So I wonder whether or not in the future there will be some guidelines around that. So potentially it's worth just thinking that through at this stage if you can. The next thing to think about is order processing. And this again is very specific to you and how you're going to operate. But it's thinking about, do you know how you're going to, who's going to do your order processing? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be someone that works with you? Are you going to bring someone on board specifically for that? What's the process going to be for picking and packing? Particularly if you're bringing on someone to do this, how are you going to make sure they do it to your satisfaction? And then the other thing that might not be obvious is, do you have the space to do this? I know that sort of answering this question was quite transformative for Marion in that realizing that actually she needed to make a space for this. And one of the tasks that she set herself in getting the bricks and mortar store online was, or sort of bringing that back to an open state, should I say, was actually to build off or carve off a part of the store for her to do that order processing, as well as training staff to do that processing and keeping the stock in sync, as we discussed earlier. So again, not digital at all. This is really about, before you pull the trigger on launching your online store, just casting your mind over these physical aspects of fulfillment. The last couple of questions on this section is really about considering how you want to talk to your customers during that fulfillment, or the order and fulfillment process. I think a lot of us are very used to online sales these days and expect a certain degree of communication to happen during the process. And certainly it's very alarming if you purchase something and you don't get an email to say, yeah, thanks for purchasing. So first question you might want to ask yourself is, what email address are you going to use to manage your customer services? Are you going to use your standard kind of hello at or info at address, or do you need to set up one specifically for e-commerce? Particularly that's relevant if you're going to have a team of people working on that. Having some kind of an address that you can all share is a good way to manage that process. And then it's about thinking about what do you want to say to your customers at the key moments in that fulfillment process. So to just give you an idea, my expectation as a customer is when I pay for an item online, I want to receive an email to say, yep, thank you, you've paid, we've received your order, we haven't just taken the money and run. Sometimes you'll get a little note to say, good news, we've started picking your product, it'll be on the way soon. And then you'll always expect that, okay, great, it's shipped, it'll be with you in a couple of days. Thanks for ordering with us, and obviously linking you back into the store. So this is the sort of the sixth digital step, if you like, is where you can defining what the communications are at the key stages in the life cycle of ordering a product. Again, this is one of those areas that's very specific to the the e-commerce platform that you've chosen. With Squarespace, in Marion's case, there really wasn't that much configuration that she could do. There were only certain parts of the emails that get sent out that she could change. And actually that did cause a slight issue to begin with in terms of the in-store pickups, because the emails that get sent out were more or less the same, irrespective of whether or not it was being shipped by a carrier or being shipped to in-store. So again, it's worth thinking at this point, to what degree do you really want to curate that experience? Is your business sort of quite reliant in terms of its strategy on the branding of that kind of unboxing and that that process of making that order and anticipating that order? And if it is, then potentially you need to select your platform very carefully to make sure that you've got the control that you desire in defining this process for your customers. So that was quite quick. That was section 4. Again, I'm anticipating that would have been relatively pain-free for those of you who are already retailers. So I'm just going to pause for maybe 15-20 seconds just to let you score those before moving on to the last section, which is about legal. And fair warning to Claire and Wendy, if you've fallen asleep, your time to present is coming. So I'll just leave you for 2 seconds to note those down. Okay, let's move on to the last section, which is legal. So at this point, we're going to be joined by our partners in KCC Trading Standards, who are going to talk to you about the first 2 items on this list. Before they do, I'm just going to quickly just highlight the last 4, which is around data protection and privacy policy. So you're going to start capturing information which you previously didn't, such as customer names and addresses. So you need to have a robust process and policy for dealing with that information, and you'll need to be publicizing that on your website. You are going to be using a payment processor to manage customer payments. I think it would be wise to make sure you're confident that payment processor is a good one and has a good policy. There are lots of household names that you could choose. There are also lots of sort of slightly smaller processes that you might want to do a bit more due diligence on. It's also important to understand how taxation applies to your products. You might be like Marion and all your products are vatable, but you might have a more complicated scenario. So understanding how that works for your products is important. And then a kind of a general catch-all, you will know much better than I if there is other legislation that applies to your store. So just being aware of that as we go. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Wendy, who is going to talk to you about the ICACS legislation. Wendy, if you're there.
Thanks,
yeah, there we go.
Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Wendy. I'm a Trading Standards Officer with Kent County Council Trading Standards, and I'm just going to briefly run through today some legislation that will be important to you if you're trading online. the most important legislation is probably going to be the ICACS. We shorten it because it is quite a mouthful. In its entirety, it's the Consumer Contracts, Information, Cancellation and Additional Charges Regulations 2013. They replaced the original, much easier to say, distance selling regulations, which were introduced in 2000. They're brought in really to give consumers confidence when trading online. Back in 2000, online trading wasn't what it is now, and consumers were concerned. So this requires businesses to provide specific information to consumers to allow them to purchase safely, really. Most of the information is general information that you would naturally give to your consumer anyway, so things like your name, your address, your contact details, information about the product, the price, the description, and importantly, their cancellation rights. Consumers have 14 days from the day after they've received the goods to cancel under the ICACS regulations for any reason. And again, this is about giving consumers confidence. Where they're ordering online, they haven't got the opportunity to view the product, to see the product, to try it on, to assess whether the colour is right, whether the spec is right. So this means that they can order it, part with their money, have a look at it, and then return it if it isn't acceptable for them. So it's about really building confidence. And so if they cancel within the first 14 days, then they would return the product to you. You would issue the refund, including any delivery costs for you delivering it to them originally. However, you can ask for the consumer to pay the return postage, but you need to make that very clear to the consumer beforehand. So you would really need that in your terms and conditions on your website. If you don't let them know that they're to pay the return postage, then you couldn't legally enforce that they do. Also, it's important to note with these regulations that they only apply in business to consumer contracts, not in business to business contracts. So it's important to note. Now, there are quite a lot more information requirements in these regulations that you need to provide to your consumers, such as delivery charges, postage and things like that. Too much to go through in the presentation today. So what I've done is created a checklist, which I've given to Jason to attach to the presentation for you today. So you will be able to view that in your own time to make sure that you're complying with the regulations. And now I will pass to my colleague Claire.
Hello there, my name's Claire. I'm also from Kent Trading Standards, and I'm just going to have a quick chat to you today about terms and conditions, because it's quite likely you're going to need some terms and conditions on your website if you're trading online. Now, terms and conditions, more precisely the unfair part of the terms and conditions, comes under the Consumer Rights Act, Part 2. So it's not a legal requirement to have terms, but they can be helpful and they set out the basis of your contract. So for online trading, it's pretty much essential because you would need your cancellation information and the bits and pieces that Wendy was just talking about. So that is a legal requirement. So you would need some form of contract terms on your website. So the cancellation, it's also a good idea to explain to the customer how and when they need to pay, what's going to be covered and what isn't going to be covered, the returns policy, and what happens if things go wrong. So they're all quite good things to have set out on your customer journey, and then it helps consumers know where they stand. So consumer contracts are better protected in law than business to business. So business to business don't have the same protection as consumers. So if you're having consumer clients and business clients, it's probably a good idea to have separate terms and conditions for those because they have separate protections. So that's a good one to note. Terms in consumer contracts must be fair and balanced, otherwise you might not be able to enforce them. So for example, if a trader writes into a contract that he or she can cancel without charge, but the other person has to pay a fee if they want to cancel, then that would be likely deemed an imbalance in the parties' rights, and that would probably be unenforceable. So if you have unfair terms in the contract, you'll be on a sticky wicket to try and enforce them. So that's why it's a good idea to keep them fair. Also, you need to keep them in plain English if you can, and as short as possible. So you see a lot of insurance contracts, a lot of holiday contracts, and they've got pages and pages of terms and conditions. We always advise to keep them as short as you can. You probably only need, at the most, probably 10 terms really, just to explain the contract and to say what's going to happen. It's important for the customer to have a view of the terms and conditions before they become bound by them. So having them on the website where they can just click in and read what's going to be required of them is a good idea. It is also a good idea to have a complaints procedure, because that sets out, if they have any problems, what they're going to need to do to sort those out. This is a very important area for businesses, as it just ensures, it instills customer confidence with a business. If they know, if they do have a problem, they'll be able to find out, you'll be able to help them with that. So it's a really good idea to have, even if it's just a little paragraph in the terms, to say how they contact you if there are any issues. So that's a good idea as well. So that's less a very brief overview of the terms and conditions side of it, but myself and Wendy work in the business advice services at Trading Standards. So if you would like any further information on the ICAX regs or the legal compliance of your website, then you can always get in touch with us. There'll be some links at the end of the presentation for you as well. We'll also be around for the Q&A session, so if you have any questions, then you can ask us today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Wendy and Claire. That's really useful. Certainly a few things there that I hadn't noted before, so that's really great. Just to note, I haven't actually put the links at the end of this presentation, but what will happen is we're going to communicate to everyone that's on the call now to send around the slides and all the other bits of information. So I'll make sure that those links are there. Great. Okay, so last couple of slides from me. Really, once you've gone through that legal checklist and you're confident that you've got all the information you need and you've set up those policies, you're ready for the last two digital steps. So having written those lovely policies and curated them and made them really nice and easy and plain English to read, you need to make sure they're on your web pages. So again, very platform specific, but each platform will have some way of helping you to display your terms and conditions to your customers, particularly at payment time during the checkout process. And then the last thing is is configuring that taxation process. So again, thinking about Marion's example, everything was VATable. So with Squarespace, it was a simple case of telling Squarespace the prices that are quoted include sales tax, and then basically the platform does the magic behind the scenes of calculating VAT and displaying that on receipts and at the checkout. So those are really the final steps that, having kind of done all that thinking, all that preparation, will allow you to get going, get your store launched. So we've now gone through, and I'm just looking at time in the last few moments of the presentation. We've gone through the e-commerce checklist. Hopefully that's been really helpful in getting you to think through what you need to start planning, and helping you to sort of benchmark your level of confidence on how you're going to do this. I'd like to just quickly tell you about our digital coaching service. So, you know, our hope is that you've got enough information from the webinar to get going, to do some planning, and then you've got the confidence to start implementing your e-commerce transformation. If you do at any point need any support, and I think in particular when it comes to taking any of those digital steps, we in the KITC offer what we call digital coaching. So this is delivered over coaching conversations, which given the current situation will be over some form of video conferencing. During those conversations, our digitally savvy coaches, who are students of the university, will help you to kind of work through the challenges that you may be experiencing as you go through those digital steps, and they'll help you to understand any of the difficult to understand areas of the checklist as well. So if you we'd love you to keep in touch, and I know certainly that Marcus and colleagues will be sending out some communications after this. If you wanted to navigate to this link, which is on our public facing website, and fill in the form, one of the things that we will definitely do is send you the presentation that I've just delivered, along with some notes to help you decipher it. We'll also give you a worksheet which allows you to fill out that checklist in your own time if you haven't done so already throughout the presentation. And we're also going to give you an introductory offer for our digital coaching service. So yeah, I'll leave that up on the screen for a few moments if you wanted to note down the URL, but certainly we'll send out that information shortly via email. Great. Okay, so well done for sort of sitting through all that. That was a lot of information. You know, I imagine some of you are feeling information overload, but equally some of you may have some very burning questions. So what I'm going to do now is to host a Q&A session, which we've got about 15 minutes for that now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And so, yeah, myself, Claire and Wendy are at your disposal if you have any questions that you would like to ask. And if you would, if you can, if you put your hand up, we'll call you out to ask the question. We'll do our best to answer that. So, yeah, yes, I can't see your name. I can see your face. Yeah, please. You're currently muted. I can't unmute you, unfortunately.
Hi.
Yeah. Hello. Yes.
Oh, hi. Thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Jo, and I've just pivoted my small business I run from home during COVID. I used to make cakes for cafes, and I used to do baking workshops from home. Currently, I've been sending out cookie boxes through the post. So it's not online, but I'm working towards do that. At the moment, I do it through my Instagram and things like that. I just had a question quickly about the cancellation. That sort of worried me a bit, because when they pay for them, I sort of sent them out straight away. I'm not sure about cancellation or returning, because it is food. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, there are some exemptions with the cancellation regulations, and food and perishable goods is one of those exemptions. So that wouldn't be covered, but you wouldn't be with the cancellation rights. You would be exempt from that. So. Okay,
that's fabulous. Thank you. I did sort of think, oh my God, what do I do about that? So, yeah. Oh, that's very useful. Thank you.
You're exempt from that.
Thank you.
But if you are trading with food online, there is information that you would need to put on your website. You would be, as Claire said, exempt, but the specific information you'd want on your website to comply with the food legislation as well.
Yeah.
So you the name of your food available for consumers to see, and a list of ingredients.
Yeah.
Any allergen information would need to be on there, and any instructions for use, like if they had to microwave it or something like that. So if you're selling directly online, as in they could order it online and pay for it online, you'd need to make sure that information was available for them to see.
Yeah, thank you. I have done that, because what I do, if I'm supplying a cake or doing anything like that, I do that. So I've just sort of putting that online also on each thing. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. I've just seen a question on the chat from Q saying that I've mentioned Squarespace and that there's also Wix and other closed platforms. Wouldn't an open source platform be better, as it avoids lock-in, which is an issue as systems develop? Additionally, open source gives the possibility to have a personalized in a way a closed system would not. Would you agree with this? So I guess my answer to that is, broadly speaking, yes. In the long term, in the long run, if you're very committed to e-commerce, then I think having some kind of open source system that you can develop yourself is crucial in being able to develop the kind of highly curated experience that you would want to offer your customers. I guess where we see the value in platforms like Squarespace, Wix, Weebly, and others is it allows you to get going really quickly and to start making sales and potentially, you know, the profits from that being used to develop your open source platform. So yeah, there is some element of lock-in, but I think you're sharing the cost of development with everyone else who's also using that closed platform. So yeah, I don't think one's better than the other. I think they're part of a journey. Is my response. Katrina, I noticed you turn your video on. Are you warming up to ask a question? No. Yeah.
No, I just thought you better speak.
Oh, I see. Great. No worries. There's a question from Ronnie McBride. Hi, Ronnie. So if my product is digital, for example, a research report or PDFs rather than the physical, are there any specific differences that I should consider? I mean, from a digital perspective, most of the platforms that I've encountered give you the opportunity to manage digital products slightly differently from physical ones. So particularly if you're wanting to allow people to sort of, if you want to fulfill that order straight away, so give people a link to download a report, for example, the platform supports that process, so the fulfillment is different, certainly. I don't know, Claire or Wendy, if you could comment from a sort of trading standards perspective.
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
So the question was around effectively, is there any differences between a physical and a digital product in terms of how you would treat them?
No, I don't think there is. I think you would have to provide the product from a trading standards point of view. We would look at it, if you're selling something, you would have to provide it. But apart from that, a digital product is something you can purchase along with an actual physical product. So no, from a trading standards point of view, I don't think there would be a difference in that. There are some differences in the way digital products are sold in terms of the distance selling regulations. There's, for instance, if you start you don't get the cancellation rights if you start the digital contract straight away. So there are some differences in that way, but not in terms of physical and digital selling point of view. Yeah.
Great. Ronnie's just followed up with a follow-up question. Again, from a trading standards perspective, if the product is being sold globally rather than UK, are there any other considerations?
Yes, there would be, because you would need to ensure that your product complied with the laws in the countries where you're selling them to. So if you're selling them within Europe, then it will comply, because all our rules at the moment are the same. So that wouldn't be an issue. But if you were selling to, say, China or America, then you'd have to make sure your product complied with their rules as well. So you'd have to take individual advice on that if you were selling globally.
Great, thank you. Ronnie, Ronnie says thank you. I think that's answered his question.
Okay.
We have another question from Q. Are there any specific differences regarding the supply of electrical equipment or training materials as opposed for cloth or clothing, for instance? Q, are you talking from a kind of digital perspective, or is that directed at trading standards? Trading standards.
Yeah, electrical products have their own regulations, so you would have to have a look. We could help you with that, but yes, there are differences. Electrical products have their own set of standards and regulations that you'd need to follow. So there are definitely differences for that.
Thank you. Got a question from Chris. What are the legal requirements if you are collecting cookies? I'm going to assume you're meaning digital cookies. And from my perspective, that would be covered under your the data protection policy that you have on site, which says your compliance with GDPR, that says we're capturing information for the processing of your experience, that kind of thing. I don't know if you want to add to that, Claire or Wendy.
It would come under the GDPR, yeah, but unfortunately that's the Information Commissioner Office. It's not something we can generally advise on, but you would have to make sure you were complying with GDPR.
Yeah, and I'd say I don't think that it would be different necessarily to the process you'd have to use for just a normal website. So if you're collecting cookies for a website, you don't necessarily need to do anything different if you're just collecting cookies for your e-com store. I think the thing to be aware of is, with a normal website, you're generally speaking not collecting identifiable personal information, which you most certainly would be when you're selling products via an online store. So there is an extra burden there in terms of how you manage that information.
Yeah, and you would need to say in your privacy policy if you are collecting cookies as well.
Yeah, great point. Super. Q asked a follow-up, and I think that must say that's from the question around electrical items, etc. Are there any links that we can share?
Yes.
Yeah.
There are links. There's also, if you go onto the Business Companion website, if you just Google Business Companion, there's an awful lot of information and guidance in there for businesses. So that's a good one you could do straight away. But we can also send links to the electrical equipment regulations.
Great. So yeah, Chris is happy with the cookie information. We've got another question from Kerry. So it says, if I'm selling or providing a service rather than product, are there specific differences I should consider?
Yeah, there are, because when you sell products, this comes under the Consumer Rights Act as well. So for products, they have to be satisfactory quality and fit for purpose and as described, whereas for services, they have to be provided with reasonable care and skill within a reasonable time and for a reasonable cost. So in terms of trading standards, there are different laws that are written in statute to say what consumers could expect from goods and services. So in that respect, there are differences. I'm not sure about selling digitally and sort of actual goods online. So yeah, but there would be differences when you sell services and goods.
Fantastic. Great.
You can also find information about that on the Business Companion website as well.
Great. And Q's just posted on the chat for everyone who's not monitoring that a link that you might find interesting. Yeah, and Kerry says thank you.
I did just have a little other piece of advice for the lady selling cookies. If she wanted, it would be a good idea to add into her terms and conditions that her contracts aren't cancelable. So just to let her customers aware that her goods are exempt from the cancellation regulations.
Fantastic. Well, we're about to hit the top of the hour. So unless anyone has any final questions, I'll hand back to Marcus to close us out. Yeah, looks like over to you, Marcus.
The key lady says thank you very much. Excellent. Well, I mean, outstanding couple of hours. Thank you to the three of you, because what was clear for me is that e-commerce isn't just about a different payment method. It's not just about another way to take cash in. It's actually almost a separate business model in its own right. And what you talked through there in those different stages, it's almost like you're sort of going back and re-looking at the business in its earlier stages, especially when you use those tools like the business model canvas or the BMC as we always call it. I think it was nice to know that the KITC, as part of our School of Computing here at the University of Kent, is there to help, which I think is quite reassuring for some people. I think it was interesting as well around where, if you're on Squarespace as an example, and we have mentioned them a lot, we're not sponsored by Squarespace, but we have used them throughout. It was interesting that really what you're saying is you would, Jason, come back in if you need to, that you would probably need to stick with Squarespace to then have your e-commerce module rather than looking at e-commerce housed somewhere else. Although I note the discussion around the sort of open source angle as well.
I will just jump in there, Marcus. You still have the option, so there's nothing to stop you using e-commerce on a different platform. You'd need to integrate the two somehow, but it is possible.
So you could have a website on Wix, for example, and your e-commerce through Squarespace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the only thing you need to manage there somewhere is that they're trying to keep the branding the same, so that when you jump between the two sites, the customer isn't feeling like they've completely gone somewhere else. But from a platform perspective, yeah, that's totally doable. My advice would be, consider what you want in terms of the features for an e-commerce platform, and choose that carefully. If don't necessarily be beholden to whatever you use for your website.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Obviously, this is, as I said at the top of the session, this is a series of webinars that the university wanted to put on as part of our rapid response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There's been a whole range of things in the press that you'll have seen the university has done and responded to, and this webinar series is very much about helping our businesses get back to some kind of normality, whatever that looks like, and what we talk about as COVID UK, and how businesses are going to need to clearly innovate and pivot as they move forward. I said about the social media, C19 bus recovery. We really would appreciate everybody, if you've got the time and inclination to put something out on socials, and please do use that hashtag. If you wanted to have a look at some of the other webinars that are available, just go to kent.ac.uk/enterprise and you'll see a link there to our webinar series. We've launched about 7 at the moment, and there's another 3 or 4 that will be coming soon. Thank Jason Marshall of Computing, Claire Robinson and Wendy May from Trading Standards. Thank you.